All right, and we are live. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nico. This is Brighter Days, Darker Nights, and today I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Dr. Kelli Ritter, who is an amazing resource for mental health and also health as a whole, and parenting, and all sorts of wonderful things that are in her wheelhouse. So I'm so excited for y'all to join us for this conversation live today. And for everyone who's joining on the replay, you are also so welcome. There should be a comment field in the post if you want to post your questions afterwards. And for everyone who's live, the chat is open. Kelli and I both can read it. So as we're chatting, you're welcome to put your questions in. Dr. Kelli, thank you so much for coming today. Would you give a quick introduction for those who are new to your work?
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm excited that people are joining. This is fun. This is my first Substack Live, so I'm just excited to be here. Yeah, so you and I met through Quantum Biology Collective at 1st. We're both certified in applied quantum biology, and I just remember being on calls where we would be in Q&A calls, and I would be so impressed with your questions. And I was like, who is this brilliant woman? Because your questions were so, I mean, you could just tell that only a smart person can ask that kind of question, like blowing my mind. Yeah, so that's how we met. But my background is in clinical mental health. I was in traditional clinical mental health. I've been for almost over 30 years now, which is
Wow.
crazy because I don't feel that old. So, but I'm also, we do an update.
I go through that too. When I look back, I'm like, wow, I have decades of experience. What?
I know. I was just saying that the other day. Like, seriously, it is decades now, which is great. But I left traditional mental health. I was an associate professor and researcher, not because I didn't love it, but I just found that I needed to go on a different path. And so now I'm training anxiety recovery coaches and doing a lot. My anxiety recovery is kind of my area of specialty. So, and I'm a mama. And,
yes, that's right.
Yeah. And originally what might matter for this conversation is originally I just wanted to work with children. I was like 22 years old and I was kind of scared of working with adults anyway, but I've always loved children and babies and wanted to make the world a better place for children. So I think that's why you and I really have connected, because we want to
Same. Exactly. Yeah, same. I have that motivation as well. When we're coming in, we're so fresh. If we can get everything, like the foundation of everything set up well in that stage, then there's the whole lifespan that they have where if they, are coming in with their heads on straight and feeling good about themselves, they can do such important work and just dive straight into all the great things, all the opportunities we have in life. So yeah, I was motivated in that way too. And it does just spiral out bigger, because in order for the children to have a good childhood, the parents have to be supported. For the parents to be supported, like the institutions have to be transformed. And for the institutions to be transformed, it's like the protocols and all of it, like it gets so large. So
that's right.
But I think we'll be somewhat grounded in this conversation, both of us. I know that your approach is very grounded in what can you do today to help yourself feel better and start being on the track towards recovery. So I'm so glad to have you here. And I know you're so experienced. Your podcast is a wealth of information, and I really appreciate the guests that you have and the perspectives you share in that. So for anyone who is new to Kelli or getting inspired based on what we have today, make sure you go and check out her website and her podcast. And she has a new program that just launched that's all about anxiety recovery for moms. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it's about us moms that have anxious kiddos, but it really, of course, it's really about supporting us and nourishing our nervous system so that we can be grounded. But it really equips moms with all the tools that we have taught, that we teach all the time. But what really helped me as a mom of a child with anxiety, that's how I found applied quantum biology. So,
it is. Okay, great.
Yeah, I was trying to help him.
Yeah, it's so
inspiring. My life, of course. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So how does that work? Because it probably for someone like to me, I'm like, I know exactly what you mean. But for someone who's more new to this, what do you mean when how can quantum, which is like tiny particles, right? How does quantum apply to a child with anxiety? That seems very abstract.
It does, doesn't it? But it's actually pretty simple. Like, we are electric beings.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I was taught traditionally, we learn a lot about like mechanical and chemical and thinking about things that way. But if you go
Mm-hmm.
to the simplest, smallest, on the subcellular level, it really is about danger signaling in the
Oh,
body.
okay.
And so when the body doesn't have enough of the inputs that it needs or too many of these stressful inputs, it will give us symptoms. And one of those symptoms is often chronic anxiety. And so
Mm-hmm.
children are these little wonderful, sponges, and their bodies are showing us what needs to happen. So anxiety is actually a signal. It's a signal of lost energy, of depleted vitality, a depleted system. So
Mm,
the quantum health strategies, even though that sounds like really fancy, you and I know it's really actually pretty simple. We break it down to light, water, earth, food, and breath is what I
mm-hmm.
how I teach it. And that is very doable in our family lives. We can work
Mm-hmm.
these things in. So ultimately, what we're doing is supporting mitochondrial health, but also,
Okay.
of course, circadian rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
But I break it down. It's super. The mini course for moms is actually a master class, and I made it super practical and just breaking it down because I think people look at the word quantum and they're immediately like, I don't think that applies to me. That sounds. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I was just curious, I think enough when I started hearing it,
You're right.
like, this is really, but if it resonates, like, you can feel it in your body when you're like, I think this is the next this is the step I need to take to help myself and my family. Because even if you don't understand the word quantum, it really is what makes sense when you start to understand our body from an electrical coherence
Mm-hmm.
perspective. You're like, "Of course, that's why I felt great when I was a kid, running around outside at camp. Oh, that's why I feel so much better on vacation, is because I'm barefoot outside." Or you start to
Mm-hmm.
put together that it's not just the fact that you were a kid and you were less stressed, even though it might have
Yeah.
something to do with it,
Mm-hmm.
um, or the fact that you're on vacation and that's why it's happening. You start to see that you could work this into your daily life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that so much. And it is so important for the children right now. I was just talking with a mom who was she was a teacher. She is a teacher, I should say, working in public schools in an inner city. And she was telling me that she has children who are coming into her school. They start at 7 a.m. They don't go home till 6 p.m. They
Yep.
have one 15-minute recess to be outside if there's not snow on the ground, if the weather is not yucky, which means they're actually just spending all the entire daylight hours indoors under artificial light.
Yeah.
And that really just blew my mind because I mean, I was outraged when I learned that kids were only getting two 15-minute resource recesses. And she was telling me that they'd actually dropped it to one and it was contingent upon the weather. That blew my mind, especially knowing what I know about how important natural daylight is for all of our hormones and signals and everything.
I know. And for growth and for development and for our mental health. I think that's the part that sometimes people don't really understand how important natural light and being outdoors in nature in and of itself, like your background
Mhm.
is so gorgeous right now because it's helping all of our nervous systems. It actually sends safety signals
Mhm.
on a subcellular level. We're tuned to that. So, and even on a, we call it yucky day, but it's a winter day, you still need to be outside because your
Mhm.
body is adaptive. The way that we're able to adapt is by having supporting our circadian rhythms, which is
Mhm.
light. It's primarily, but other inputs too.
Mhm.
And the thing is, this is why I started working with adults. you bring up a good point, because the teachers, if parents and teachers and grandparents and communities understand this, then all of us become outraged. And when we realize that anxiety is not a problem to be solved, it's a signal we need to pay attention to it. So, um, oh, we got a comment. I just want to,
Yep.
I saw it come up. So I want to make sure we, um,
Yeah. Hi,
answer
Roman.
it. Yeah.
He
Uh,
says, thanks for the show. How does the body send safety signals during daylight?
ha. I have a feeling he maybe knows, because that's a great question. And it's,
Roman's very knowledgeable in this field. Yes.
I figured, like, that's the kind of question that you ask. Like, how is it sending safety signals? Well, the light, thank you for asking the question too. It's a really good one. So the light, which we know, natural light, well, all light, doesn't matter whether it's inside or outside, it's got frequencies. The light frequencies are available in the light, and that has information or code. And our eyes, the sensors in our eyes and on our skin, are picking up on that. So that signals to the body what time of day it is, what season we're in. That's how our mitochondria orient. And the mitochondria are just those little organelles that are extremely important inside of our cells that are making our energy and water and all the other things. So that light becomes really important because it's providing information through our sensors on our skin and in our eyes. So if we're inside, then the information, we're getting the incorrect signals. So our body doesn't know what time of day it is. And the reason that's important is because when to make which neurotransmitters, when to release those neurotransmitters, when to make which hormones, when to release them, all of that is coordinated by light. And especially that when we talk about mental health and early morning light and how important that is for setting the tone for the entire day. And at sunrise is really helpful. But even about an hour after sunrise or so, that's when we have UVA rise. And UVA has a specific frequencies that are telling the body that's what orchestrates and coordinates serotonin in the body. And so I think people, which I think is more important than just a feel good neurotransmitter that we used to think, I think it's actually doing a whole lot more than that.
It is. I have a post in my Substack that's about serotonin as a reproductive hormone, and it's really important for puberty for boys and for girls, for their serotonin to be regulated. And that's part of why SSRIs have different effects on men and women when they're used. And it's not really teased out very well in practice, even though in the literature we can say like, whoa, they're responding to this in totally different ways. But then in practice, they're like, oh, you have depression. Let's start messing with your serotonin signaling.
Yeah. And I just wrote, I haven't posted it yet, but I've been doing a deep dive into serotonin and fascia and how the body, how trauma gets stored in the body and the role of serotonin in that. But you just, we have to always take it back to the fact that if the light is incorrect, or if it's indoor lighting that's giving our bodies the wrong signals, then it's not coordinating. So of course you're going to look off, behavior is going to look off, things are going to look off. But you're right. Then we get a diagnosis of something as if there's a problem when actually it's a signal that's just our body's just doing its best to try and help us. It's basically saying, look, I need to orient. You need to need the right inputs. So,
yeah. Yep. And I see it also with the regard to that feeling of safety, that part of it is a feeling of if there is adequate energy or not. So cortisol is one of the hormones that gets really upset by all of this light that's happening, this indoor light that has all of this blue and green light without the normal infrared light. So when we're getting outdoors, we have the infrared light is also just so important. And that makes the body generate more ATP and water. You actually have more energy. When you have energy, you have more bandwidth for looking around and seeing what's going on. So there's social safety, and then there's also physical safety. So likewise with nutrition, and I know you had so
Yeah.
much work that you used to do with the gut-brain
Yeah.
axis and working in nutrition, which is another thing that I see when people have sleep disruptions. Their cortisol is messed up.
Yeah.
And I see it in children and in adults where they have these middle of the night wakings, where they're actually hungry. And you can actually even read about that in
Yeah.
sleep literature. People are writing about sleep hundreds of years ago and them being in like semi-starvation and needing to wake up in the middle of the night to eat a snack because their body's like calling for energy. So when you have a foundational baseline of energy, it's not just the food, but also the light, then that's another layer of safety. I would love if you could tell a little bit about your story about how you went from mental health into the gut brain health into the circadian gut brain axis.
Yeah, it's a super windy road.
Maybe just
So,
like the mile points. I already
uh,
kind of gave some mile markers there, but
I
I
know.
think it's that so many of us in this space, when we get into it, we've been down the gut healing health and we've made so much progress and then kind of hit a wall. And so I was
Yeah.
just wondering if you could share a little bit about what that looked like for you when you realized you needed more than just
Yeah.
the nutrition.
Yeah, because I had hit a wall in traditional mental health, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
doing that well, I'd always sort of thought we were missing some things. And so I had hit a wall there and just couldn't quite figure out what was happening. But I was led to nutrition. I've always been really interested in food and the brain and the gut and how I just love food, right? I love to cook. I love food. Um and I love feeding people, and so I was interested in that, and then my dad had cancer, and he actually
Mm,
passed away from pancreatic cancer, and I got really into nutrition and gut health for him, and then started
mm-hmm.
realizing how much well, first of all, like, speaking of serotonin, most of the serotonin is made in the gut, not the brain, so then I was mad
Mm,
that we're spending so much time talking about and training people about the brain and brain health, and we just rarely talk about nutrition.
mm,
I think that's changed in mental health over the last 20 years, but 20 years ago it was no one, people were laughing at me or thinking I was ridiculous for bringing in wanting to talk about nutrition and specifically gut health because of
mm,
the gut brain axis. And to me that's,
mm-hmm.
how can you not want to know about that? And then I was frustrated as a professor trying to teach nutrition to counseling students. And first I had to fight colleagues that I love. So it's like, really? We're going to argue about that? But they thought that that wasn't clinical enough to be teaching counseling students about the gut. I know, Nico, you're like, what?
I know you're
It's
making faces for.
foundational. Even the building blocks for the neurotransmitters.
Mm-hmm.
Amino acids, like, you don't wanna start, so I was frustrated with that, but then also I finally got to teach it in counseling, mental health counseling master's program, and the students weren't able to grasp a lot of, some of them were, and I think students liked the class, but they were eating their Doritos and drinking Coca-Cola, and we were sitting in classrooms that were drenched in lighting that, and I didn't know about the lighting. I hadn't made the connection there. And I didn't know that most of gut health or gut health related issues, dysfunction is related to dysfunctional circadian rhythms. I,
Mm-hmm.
so I even had a lot to learn, but I just felt like, so I became a nutritional therapist thinking that that was really, this is it.
Yeah.
We're going to help people and I'm going to be able to like bridge the gap. And part of it, it was good, it is good, but some of it was hard because people who come in for mental health counseling often don't wanna talk about their food. They think their food is fine. They don't understand why you're talking about food and gut, and I think that's shifting too. But
Mm-hmm.
I still was missing the big piece because I was using all of the tools that I've ever I mean, I'm trauma trained in lots of different
Yeah.
modalities, and I was using all the things to help people, and there was still, people were still anxious. Like, we could get people to where they had management, like, they were managing life okay,
Mm-hmm.
but still very chronically anxious, and it was this energy piece that I was missing. I was missing the electrical. the fact that we're an electric body and the
Mhm.
safety signaling on a cellular level, like, it's not, we have to physically do some things differently.
Mhm.
It's not just a mindset and it's not just insight. And it was also, even though I think a lot of the trauma tools that we use are are actually working on the electric body and are creating safety through frequency, but it's not taught that way really. And
Mm.
it's not the only thing that needed to happen, because if you're still drenched in the blue and the green without the balance of the infrared and the balance of natural light outside, if we're
Mhm.
drenched in that all the time, and especially at night, or when a child has to be at school before the sun rises or right at it, they miss that part, and then they're
Mhm.
there until sunset or later. Like, where I so the food piece really matters, but I didn't realize that sunlight was a nutrient until I started studying applied quantum biology. So,
Mhm.
that's a long way to answer.
That's
I
no,
told
it
you
was
it was a
great.
windy road here.
Yeah. And this is the perfect medium for storytelling. We have so many moms and professionals in our community here. And they're all, growing in their understanding of all of these things. And they all have similar winding roads. Most people that land in my sphere and learning all of this have already been through, maybe it wasn't diet, but maybe it was with exercise and movement. Or in some other way that they were working on trying to heal themselves to feel better, to be able to approach each day with confidence and strength, and for it to feel like they have the ease to be able to take risks. Um, in their lives, in their careers, in their parenting style. There's so many decisions to be made. So when you tell that story, I've heard all these different decisions you made to try to stand up and change things. If that doesn't work, to try to take another tack. I think that's so relatable. I know I've been through a lot of that. When you talk about waking children up in the morning, I tried doing school with my eldest because she really wanted to attend school. She had heard about it and she thought it was really cool and we were trying, but getting when it came we that first winter that she was not in like a preschool like play-based program where we all show up and play together, but the first one where it was like, you have a rigid schedule and it's in the morning, and then winter came and it was not sunrise. I was like, wait a second, this doesn't feel right. She doesn't want to wake up and eat breakfast right now, and I do I just send her to school without breakfast? Like,
Right.
how do I manage this? Eventually I tried back and forth going into school, pulling back out. Eventually, we landed on homeschool as the only way to really support her and then all of my other children in this way. And it was a lot of work to get there, a lot of trial and error to find what we have like a feeling of some semblance of balance now with 5 children being homeschooled together. And it's kind of easier with a pack, but so much decision making in there. And I talk with a lot of, moms who are in your boat where your children are already grown. So I'd love to touch a little bit on that because in my community, I'm like really focused on moms and babies. But most moms and babies, like a lot of us have teenagers. I have a teenager. Many women in our community have teenagers. So how does that look? Because I know that there's like the ADHD and autism that kind of happens in early childhood, but then the teen years hit, and then suddenly there's more of like the potential for there to be a depression or bipolar or other kind of diagnosis there. And the anxiety diagnosis is also, usually comes a little bit later.
Yes. Yes. You're just bringing up so many things. My mind is in so many directions. And okay, because I was just thinking about how passionate I've always been about littles. I'm
Hmm.
a play therapist, and I think that a lot of what we were able to do, what was working before we changed all the bulbs, before
Hmm.
schools went to different schedules, when more children packed lunches. Like, there were things I think that were protective so
Hmm.
that school was possible for a lot of people. And so sometimes people now will be like, yeah, but we're this far in. Like, I already have a teenager, they're engaged, they have friends, they want to be there. I get that. And and you don't have to pull everybody out. You just have to
Yeah.
figure out how to work these things in and make them a part of just what happens in the family. At first, it's kind of, it's a lot of trial and error, actually.
Mhm.
But then you figure out where you can get the light in. Where can you touch earth? When can you do that? And
Mhm.
what I found, which is really fortunate, is that you don't have to do it perfectly in order to have a lot of improvement, thankfully.
Mhm.
There are ways to do this, even with teenagers who are rolling their eyes, don't want to do it. Are like my oldest son is like, I am not wearing blue blockers. You cannot make me wear those blue blocking glasses. And I'm like, that's fine. But when you start complaining to me about your sleep or your mood or your, you know, other things, then it's always when something's wrong with them, then they come around to see what kind of voodoo you have. They're like, Mom, this hurts
Mhm.
or that, like, yeah, and then they're more willing to look
Mhm.
to utilize, and I have utilized, like, red light therapy panels. We use, blue light blocking glasses. So I do some of the biohacking, even though I always emphasize there's nothing better than nature.
Yeah.
There's nothing better for safety signaling. There's nothing better for all of the things that need to flow in a body than
Mhm.
being in nature, around nature. And so then you do the best you can on the
Yes.
weekends, in the evenings, on the vacation. Like it starts to change when you travel, where you travel, how you travel, where you start to spend your time is you just start to tweak it how you can, regardless of the age of your children. Because I think when they're little, it seems like it's going to be so much easier because you have more control about what they eat and what kind of lighting they're in, and they're much more excited about a lamp that has a red light or the fire, uh,
Yes.
all of those things when they're little, and teenagers are not so interested. But we do the best we can. I think that is my main message. It's a lot of trial and error. It doesn't have to be perfect, and we do what we can do.
Mhm. I love that. I'm so glad that you shared all of that because it is so true that it's yeah, you can do it incrementally and the best that you can in the current environment. You don't have to throw away everything. There are many ways, and I am often helping bring people down because sometimes they do get a little bit freaked out when they're like, "Wait, all of the lighting is bad and I have an indoor desk job." And what are you telling me here? And so to be able to have that bridge between, well, we now know things about our biology. When we know these things, then we can make subtle shifts, just a little bit of a difference, like taking a light break and stepping outside for your break rather than staying at your desk. Um,
Mhm.
Packing a lunch for your children so that it's food that's coherent with what you eat at home rather than sending them to the cafeteria. Like all kinds of little things that you can do that make, that improve the quality of the signals that they're getting so that they do feel more safe and have the energy and hormones and all of that flowing together, what's happening at home and what's happening at school.
Yeah. And parents, when you help parents get creative, they actually are really good. And teachers, I love that as some of the teachers, once they learn this, they're figuring
Mhm.
ways to turn the overhead lights off where they can, put lamps in their rooms, or if they're able to open a window or open a door, or
Mhm.
and even like on the way into a building that you have to be in for however many hours, like just touch the earth, touch the ground, touch the curb if it's not painted, concrete work,
Mhm.
sand, dirt,
Mhm.
even just holding on to a tree or a bush that's planted in the earth
Mhm.
for even a minute. It's virtually instantaneous, the benefits to our body for that.
Mhm.
So just working it in these little ways, that and then I find parents are really creative when they're like, "Oh, if I don't have to do it perfectly, then let me see what I can do." And even eating seasonal food, that is, that's been really helpful. So eating nutrient dense food as best you can with kids,
Mhm.
they're picky, but then eating in season and eating certain times of the day if you can. And don't force a child to eat in the morning. It's so hard because you want them to have food
Yeah.
before they have to leave. But if it's still dark outside, maybe you send them with a snack.
Mhm.
Or there are ways around that. So, but not forcing children to do things that are against their biology because we think it's good parenting, but it's actually their body knows that it's not
Mhm.
the time of day for that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that it's easy for them to even be more in tune with it because of not having all of the shoulds going on, like, they're not as concerned about running late. Like, I remember walking my daughter to, her kindergarten when we were trying that out, and I would always park on the far side so that we would walk in and avoid all of the traffic up front. Consequently, we were walking through the playground, so if we were running late, that didn't really click in her mind, like, we get 10 minutes to play on the playground, like, "Oh, we left 10 minutes late today." She's like, right?
Yeah.
She doesn't have that sense of urgency about, "The bell's gonna ring, and then we're gonna have to check you in at the office instead of just walking into the classroom," right? She's just
Mhm.
like, "It's outside and the sun's out and I wanna go and play." That was just natural to her.
Right.
Yeah.
Smart. Yeah. And it's hard because a lot of the things that we think are good parents, we're being good parents or good parenting. At some point when we realize, oh my gosh, that's actually not very helpful.
Mhm.
To not beat up on ourselves, I think is
Oh,
very
yeah.
important because
Mhm.
I find that a lot of people will, yeah, they get really upset at themselves. And
Mhm.
and it's one thing to just take responsibility for some things that you've done, but once we know better, then we just do better. We just
Mhm.
adjust. But there are so many things when my kids were little that I thought were important, like
Mhm.
making sure they had vegetables. So I was sneaking vegetables in their food, regardless of whether that was if we're in the dead of winter and I'm trying to sneak things in, like, that's
Mhm.
not necessary and not helpful.
Yeah.
Um, stuff like that, and not letting them be cold, like, just
Mhm.
it's totally fine that they don't want a jacket because their bodies know they don't need that. If they're
Mhm.
outside and they're comfortable, let them be. That cold is good or
Mhm.
hot or whatever the season is.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely, and I think that, that's something that when moms hear that, when I talk about that with them, they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh," like, "Oh, that's such a relief, like, I can let that battle go." I'm like, "Yes, they will come back for a jacket if they need one, and they will learn the hard way." I mean, there've been so many times, my two-year-old just did it where he was insisting on not. We let him outside. He comes back in not very much longer later. Hands cold, hands cold. Like, okay, let's warm you up, run him under some water, get you ready. And then it wasn't like he didn't want to go back outside. He did. He just needed to warm up first. And he knew that. And then, yeah, it's easier once they learn those lessons too, that sometimes a little bit of that experience can go way longer than, you could be having the same battle with them every day for a week and not make as much impact as a moment of what seems like leniency or allowance, um, that they can learn the lesson themselves.
Which is a far better I used to teach parenting classes before I even had children, Nico. That's
Oh,
what's
interesting.
really funny. I thought I knew so much before I even had children, and then I had them, and they completely wrecked everything I thought I knew.
Yep.
Um, I know, and I loved them more than you can ever I was just so blown away by the amount of love that pours out of you
Mhm.
when you become a parent, but also all the things I thought I was gonna do and things I thought I would never do, and then you just, we're adapting, and
Mhm.
the best thing you can do for them is not do for them things that they can do for themselves.
Oh. I was really wondering, what are you gonna say? What's the best thing you can do for your children, Kelly?
Well, if you're I used to teach, like, never do for children what they can do for themselves, which is just really hard, especially if you have a child with chronic illness or something else because something going on. We tend to step in because we need
Mhm.
to, but then we train children to be resilient and independent and responsible by letting them figure these things out and
Mhm.
trusting that if they're cold, they're going to come tell you. But I just saw a super cute little boy in the, I don't know, somebody's reel something, and it caught my eye, and it's a little boy in the pool, and he's so cold and he's shaking, and his mom is saying, "Are you cold?" "No, I'm not cold." "Do you want to get out?" "No, I'm not good. I don't want to get out." And then she's like, "Are you sure you're not cold?" And he's like, "I'm freezing." It's like, yeah. So I think as parents, we sometimes there's a place to step in, and then there's a
Mhm.
place to let them figure it out.
Mhm.
And I think that decision making, I believe for me, the best thing that I've ever done as a parent, you want to know what that
Mhm.
is dig deep into my own healing, because
Mm.
when I'm grounded and clear and I feel like my brain is working really well, I can make decisions easier. I'm more
Mhm.
available, like the energy it takes to be able to look around, and solutions pop in your head when you are clear. And so if we
Mhm.
and you don't have to do that perfectly either, but on a journey of doing your own healing work, and I really
Mhm.
want to do that. And I mean that psychologically, emotionally, physical healing, emotional, mental, spiritual healing, all of that. And I also
Mhm.
believe it doesn't matter where you start. So if you're like, well, is spiritual more important? Sometimes people ask that. Well,
Mhm.
where should you start on that? Wherever you feel like starting, because it's all connected. It's not like spiritual health is separate from your physical health, or vice versa. It's all connected because it's really all about electrical coherence.
Mhm. Right, yeah, all of the communication happening at that, it's not even the cellular, it's like the subcellular level, like it all moves up. And I love looking at quantum health in that way. Quantum biology saying like we have a connection between what's happening from the subatomic level, um, all the way through the communication happening that's actually happening with our solar system and even beyond, that we still, as I'm getting this light from the sky, it's not just like the light coming from the sun, but there's also photons coming from distant galaxies. Even though we can't see the stars right now because it's, daylight and they're blocked out, they're still overhead shining down, which are actually, like the whole particles and waves, like all of that is flowing through us at all times. And we know that we get, different kinds of storms happening from outer space. So, and that our biology is resonating and picking up. Then so
Yes,
obviously there's still a lot of things that is, we're speculating, what does that mean that we're connected to the solar system at all times, that even if you're indoors, that space storm can still be flying through your building and hitting you, is really interesting.
it's
And
re-
really a sense of that connection to everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
And that bigger picture really helps, I find, sometimes, especially in those moments where it's like, okay, we need a total reset.
I
So,
know
for someone
that's
who
true.
does need a total reset, they have anxiety or their child has an anxiety, like, where do you start with, where do you start with people? You have the 5 pillars you mentioned. Could you recap those again? We have some new people who
Mhm.
just joined in.
Yeah. So light, water, earth, food, and breath are kind of the 5 areas that
Mhm.
and you can start anywhere you want. You can start from the breath and work your way around. You can skip around. Sometimes people like to start with the food because, um, I know pun intended, but it's low hanging fruit. And so it is actually
Yeah.
all of them are foundational. So it
Mhm.
doesn't matter where you start, it's
Mhm.
resonates with people. Sometimes people will say, "I know I've got to, change my food," or "I know I'm breathing up in my chest, and I don't feel like I can ever get a really good breath, and I don't feel
Mhm.
like I ever relax into my body." And so we do more of the breath body stuff. I tend to start with light because it's what made the biggest difference for me, but I already had my food dialed in. I had already done all kinds of breath work and, trauma breath work trainings, and
Yes.
so I don't know, because if you haven't started there, so these are the elements, those are really the quantum health strategies and elements. But I also think when people are doing all of those things, when they've really dialed in on the light, and they understand water, not just being hydrated with water, but also cellularly hydrated, and they understand a little bit more about Earth and being in nature and Earth literally physically touching the Earth's surface. So they're dialed in on all of those things, but they're still feeling off. And sometimes that off is all they can say. They can't pinpoint what exactly is going on. They just know they feel off.
Hmm.
They will often think it's like perimenopausal or some kind of hormone issue or a new stage in life and not realize it's almost always emotional.
Hmm.
It's almost always something that once the body's actually safe and has enough safety signals physically and
Yeah.
biologically and on a subcellular level, then the body's ready to do some of the deeper emotional releasing.
Yeah.
And it can, and we just tend to um we like a little dog, like running all around as opposed to actually honing in and getting still and quiet and allowing that emotional release to happen.
Hmm.
And it's usually surprising to people. I've found.
Yeah. I've
Yeah.
seen that too. And the way I often see it manifest, which maybe is just because of the different language that I'm using talking with people,
Yeah.
um, is that they'll suddenly need to sleep less. So I just this week, like this month, put together my circadian sleep class because over and over I would see they get all of these things dialed in and then suddenly they're sleeping less and they're waking up in the middle of the night, not anxious, not hungry, not freaking out, but they're waking up and they're actually really calm and looking around, but they're like they think that their sleep is broken. They're like, "Why is this happening to me?" And that is the perfect time to do that kind of emotional release because your whole family is sleeping
Yeah.
and you actually have some time to yourself where it's peace and quiet. And that is when a lot of, in the past, it was normal because we didn't have all these artificial lights. Wake up in the middle of the night, it's the full moon, reflect on your dreams and have all of this emotional digestion that now we kind of race through and we sleep through and we're not aware of it happening. But yeah, it kind of takes getting the energy up to a level that you're not needing 10 hours of sleep every night. So it can be disorienting at first because you think you've done all of this healing work and you made so much progress and then suddenly what feels like a backslide is actually just that your body now has bandwidth to get to another layer deeper. So I'm so glad you mentioned that because I see it too very often, especially for people who do the work very thoroughly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then it's frustrating because you're doing all the things. But I do see us, avoiding emotion. A lot of people, it's a normal response to try and avoid some of the emotional stuff. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep, it is. Yeah, and anxiety is one of those really tricky things too
Yeah.
because it can crop up in so many different ways. And
Yep.
sometimes it is directly like it makes sense to be anxious when you have something, when you're in a
Yep.
dangerous situation. But when you're not in a dangerous situation and you feel anxious and like head on a swivel, but there's, no threats around, then it's very disorienting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there are many contributing factors, is the last thing I'll say. There are many contributing factors to chronic
Hmm.
anxiety, and I think they all matter. But all of them have one thing in common: cellular danger signaling and
Hmm.
lost energy. It's a sign of lost energy and depleted mitochondria.
Hmm. Yeah. So that's where you work with people on all of these pillars, not just doing, because a lot like traditional mental health is kind of just going at it from either like a psychological, like therapy. You just need to, like, you can think your way out of it. Um,
Yeah.
and or like the neurotransmitter level or like, and
Yeah.
or the hormones, like, oh, you just have the wrong neurotransmitters. We'll just change the neurotransmitters without understanding like the body's very wise and it's giving that neurotransmitter signal for a reason.
That's right.
So, yeah, I appreciate your work so much. It's so needed. So needed in the space because yeah, the traditional paradigm just does fall short for a lot of people. For some people maybe it is effective. I tend to get people who have already tried it and they're like it hasn't worked. I still want to feel better.
Yeah.
And so then they're asking these deeper questions.
Right. Well, I love your work, and what you're doing is so important. And there's nothing more important than our babies and our children and the next generation. So,
Mhm. Yeah, it's so neat. I'm so honored to be able to work with people through this. It's really just a super transformative time, no matter if you're getting ready to have your first baby or, I have moms that I'm supporting and they're like, I'm getting ready to have my ninth baby. I'm getting ready to have my 11th baby. Like, let's talk, right? Really amazing that no matter how many children you've had, it's always a miracle. You don't just like suddenly figure it out through more experience. We're constantly learning. And then likewise, we have a lot of moms in the community who are like their children have flown the nest. They're now parenting adults. They're like in that pending, like, am I going to become a grandma stage? Or we have grandparents also who are learning. Like, it's definitely the kind of thing that can become generational knowledge, just how to feel safe and how to make sure that you're creating an environment that is safe for everyone. And it's really, I think, surprising, but also relieving when you realize, like, oh, the general LEDs that I get could be changing the way that everyone feels in this space. I know my mom was amazed. At one point, my husband brought all the children over, and like it was a big cousin party, and I wasn't there. So I only heard about this, but the kids were all going crazy. And my husband's like, the lights are too bright. We need to turn the lights down. They're like, what? That's crazy. And they didn't want to do it. And so he just walked over and was like, shut the
Yeah,
lights down. They like turned off the overhead lights. And then within 15 minutes, all of the kids are just like sitting on the couch. Everything's all mellow. No one's running laps and bouncing off the walls and throwing things. And then everyone was like, hey, that actually worked.
I
It
know.
did, and I've heard about it happening in schoolrooms too, where the teachers, like you said, they turn off the overhead lights, and then it's a really immediate effect. So I love to bring that up for people that there's the immediate effects that within 10 minutes of changing the light, you could feel differently.
Yes.
And then within 2 days, you can really feel differently. And then within 2 years, it's like you could be like a completely different person from where you were before, because there are even longer seasonal cycles that overlap into it. So there's all these different nested scales of safety and coherence with the lighting and the mitochondria and how they're regenerating and what's happening with methylation and all these things.
Mhm. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a really good point, is just within 10 minutes. Um, and it's also kind of fun to watch people realize that from themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, I had some guests at our house and they started turning the lights on in the kitchen. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it was getting sunset, and I was like, "Oh, no, see, we don't do that here." I know you think you're at home, um, and, that's, it's just the way that people are normally, it's just a habit for them. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so I'm seeing what Simi, I remember on rainy days when teachers would turn out the lights, I know, right? And then put a movie on that, like, small TV that we had, and it was very calming. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anything that can do that, but I wanted people to know that the earthing is similar to the light. The
Mm-hmm.
It only takes a minute or 2 to have some benefits, so 10 minutes of a little bit of earthing, and I just think about teachers and parents working it in, even if you have to, wear earthing shoes or get an
Mhm,
earthing mat, and if teachers, what if they stood on a grounded mat for the majority of the day, and then the adults are more grounded. It would change
mhm,
the experience of the children if we could just focus on the light and earthing part of the story.
mhm.
Like, even if
Yeah,
we didn't get to any of the other parts.
yeah, you're reminding me of, several times in my school history where a teacher would take the whole classroom outside and deliver the lecture where we were all sitting in the grass. I remember it happening in college.
Yeah,
I think there was a little bit more freedom there.
yeah.
I don't know if it's allowed for elementary school teachers to do that, but I hardly even remember the class or what the lecture was, but I remember the feeling of sitting outside with all of my peers and it being a very like anchoring point, thinking, "Oh, I like this. I like being in class. I like being with my peers. I like that we're all learning and studying," and this just feeling of very whole that I remember that day more than any of the other days in those classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's a full body engagement, where it's hitting all of the senses with a lot more complex. And I see that with children who have, um, there people believe that they have difficult children,
Yeah.
and it's very boring inside when you look at the like a nature that has it's super wild. Even a very manicured grass field still has a huge amount of diversity compared with a carpet. And that diversity really engages all of the senses in a way that's very different from an indoor environment. Even an indoor environment that has all of the playthings and the balls and the kitchenette set and all of the things that you look at. But it's even, no matter how many pieces we add to an indoor space, it's not going to have nearly the complexity of any outdoor space. And especially the lights right now are very, very, they just short bandwidths of light frequencies instead of being a full spectrum
Right.
of the bandwidth. Um,
Right.
Simi says, Nico, you shifted my perspective postpartum when you told me my morning sun exposure is instantaneous. So freeing to know even a tiny amount makes a difference.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes, you're so right, Simi. And I do remember talking with you about that and telling you that as soon as your pupils constrict, that is a physiological response. So even if more would be better, even some is better than none.
That's right. And I think it is very freeing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it makes it because I saw your post today about, okay, we might have more ahead of it. Like I thought you were in a place of being very hopeful for the future and the way that we were going to be able, the whole world at some point, we're just going to live in our circadian rhythms are going to be supported. And it's just the way it is. And I think we are going to see more of that. I think we're going to see more homeschooling, and also kind of co-oping
Mm-hmm.
school situations in nature schools
Yes.
people are using and more freedom because I think if it's the idea is if one teacher takes her classroom outside that every single one of them will want, but there are ways that we can do this
Mm-hmm.
so that people can, and I think we're going to see more and more, but I also agree with you. Like we've got a lot of work ahead of ourselves. I mean, I want to end chronic anxiety and
Mm-hmm.
like, and I know and not anxiety that's appropriate for dangerous situations. We don't wanna ever we're not trying to get rid of the signaling, but the chronic stuck in fight or flight, we don't have to live with that if we just understand how to have the right inputs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way that we're gonna be able to do that huge task is in little bitty I mean, just like the tiniest things. And we talk about that in kind of quantum for me, I think of it's not just what's happening on the tiniest subcellular level, it's
Mm-hmm.
also the tiniest changes that we can make
Yeah.
have the biggest impact.
Yeah. When you look at the word quantum, I think it's really interesting because we
Yeah.
have the definition that we are all looking at like the tiniest thing, but they also use quantum to describe something really big where you say like a quantum shift or a quantum leap. It means something really big. So that word quantum is really exciting because it does describe both the tiny and the large, the huge impacts there.
Yeah. And not that I am a specialist. I don't, I didn't study quantum physics. I got here by a completely backwards way. But I'm fascinated the level of the quantum, how it's wacky and wonderful because
Hmm.
anything is possible and how just by observing something, it can change from a particle or a wave, which means like just because we don't necessarily understand everything, maybe we're not
Hmm.
supposed to. But if
Yeah.
anything is possible in a quantum field, then hey, the mess that we've gotten ourselves into, I think we are able to get ourselves out of that, not by our own necessarily doing, but maybe more undoing.
Right. Yeah. I was just reading this last year, I encountered the world of quantum DNA, and I'm not going to go too deep, but I just want to share this really interesting thing, which was so DNA are constantly shuttling electrons here and there in order to do all of the changes they need to do. And they found that they don't know why. It seems to be related to electron spin, that when one electron comes, the DNA will just out and out reject it. And not another DNA, an electron. Yeah, the electron will come and then DNA be like, nope, not you. And then another electron that to us, it's like, it's an electron. What do you mean? But our DNA is like, nope, not that one. Oh, yes, that one. Perfect. Here we go. Nope, not that one. Which is happening, infinitesimally many times per second in DNA at all times. It's making these tiny decisions about which electron it accepts and which electron it doesn't accept.
Uh,
So I
yes,
think that when we get to like nature is the gold standard, nature has the complexity of the signals at this scale that we're expecting, then there's certain things really make a lot more sense. So like, how can we introduce every little bit more of connection to nature?
agreed. hmm And that's fascinating. And I'm glad you brought it up. Of course, now, like, ooh, I want to learn more. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it is really fascinating. We had one more comment in here. Earthing for kids is so important, especially boys who are in public schools where they are all diagnosed with ADHD, too much energy as they are forced to sit for hours. Yeah. There's a shoe company. They're called Soft Star Shoes. I don't have an affiliate with them or anything, but they make the most cozy slippers, these little moccasins that have sheepskin and there's no paint or plastic in between. So you get that full connection. And I knew a child who he was kind of like borderline, like maybe going to get that diagnosis, maybe not. And he was one of those who's up on his toes
So,
all the time. And
yeah,
he'd been through traumatic experiences. So I'm kind of mimicking here of like what his movement was like. And so I bought him a pair of these shoes and he put them on and he was like, he dropped to the ground and took off running. And he was so excited and so happy. And that connection was so instantaneous for him. And it was just amazing to watch his whole nervous system reset just by changing his shoes.
yeah.
Um,
And that's what we mean by safety signaling. Like,
yeah.
you cannot, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And it's so, when you see it, you know it. There's a
Mm-hmm,
relaxing that can happen that isn't going to happen by being disconnected from nature. But
mm-hmm,
when you find ways to reconnect safely to
mm-hmm,
nature, then the safety signals are coming and we
mm-hmm,
don't have to really do anything else. I mean, that's amazing to me. And yet, that's a kid that may get an ASD, autism
mm-hmm,
spectrum disorder, or if it looks like they're stimming, like what
mm-hmm,
we call stimming, I'm like, that is adaptive. The When you were talking about the DNA, I'm like, wow, the body is so smart. Like, it is
mm-hmm,
so intelligent. And we always think that we're trying to outsmart it. But if we just give our body the right inputs and
mm-hmm.
align with, it's all about frequency, right? So
Yeah.
aligning our frequency, that it'll take care of itself. And it is hard. I would want to say, like, as a mom, you're like, "Well, do I have to buy different shoes? And do we have to get a different, and which one, I don't know which one to do." And
Yeah.
I get that too, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm the same way, where you learn of one thing and you're in a spin. And I think just the smallest things that you can do that are free, I always say this, if it's free
Yeah.
and it's available to you and free, then
Mm-hmm.
and really simple, I start with that. And then
Yeah.
you can always work around, but it's going to be a lot cheaper to buy a pair of earthing shoes or these cute moccasins or whatever people will wear, because sometimes it's the right and perfect thing and sometimes they're like, I'm not wearing that. So
Yep.
but they're cute. Get
Mm-hmm.
cute things. But if it's that's going to be a lot less expensive than a whole bunch of supplements and different therapies and medications and all the things that are then going to help somebody maybe manage at best,
Mm-hmm.
but not
Yeah.
drop their heels and take off. Like, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the changes they can happen so quickly when they do happen. Of
Yeah.
course, there's still like the ongoing work that needs to happen after that. But yeah, there's so much
Yeah.
that can happen, and everything is so fluid and flexible. I love that. So, share with people your website, your podcast, your class that you just released. I think you have a couple of classes available, but one of them is new that's very relevant to this conversation, specifically for moms with
Mom.
children who have anxiety.
Yeah. So I would love to keep in touch with people. So mostly I'm on Instagram.
Mhm.
A little
New
while.
Substack. You do have a
Yeah, I
Substack
haven't
now.
just
Yeah, woohoo, welcome.
I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but this is really fun. I really like the platform. So, and I think of Substack as people that want to go a little bit deeper.
Mhm.
So that's really nice. And then the website, anxiety-recovery.com. the podcast, which your episode, Nico, is being released tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, yay!
Yay! So it is, and we're talking all about moms and mental health and motherhood. So that is Quantum Mental Health Podcast. And the class that it's a mini course that I just released called Mom Sanity. We're
Mm-hmm.
supporting our anxious kiddos. So to moms with kids that are experiencing chronic anxiety. And then if there are any practitioners, I'm also launching Foundations in Anxiety Recovery Coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So any
So excited for that. It's
I am
so
so
needed.
because regardless of what kind of practitioner you are, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we all work with people who are experiencing more anxiety. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited. Got lots going.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you, everyone who showed up live and listened into the replay. I hope you came away with some really good takeaways and some ideas for things that you can do and share to support yourself and your family. So, thank you all. Thank you, Kelli. And we'll see you all again very soon.
yes. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.